Hi, my name is Georgia, and this is my channel Sweet Darkness, where a little bit of everything goes on. Today, I'll be presenting the creepy murder in room 1046, an unsolved murder from 1935 that is still unsolved to this day. On Wednesday, January 2nd, 1935, around 1:20 p.m., a man calling himself Roland T. Owens checked into a room at the Hotel President in Kansas City, room 1046. He checked in with nothing but a comb, a brush, and toothpaste. That was reported by Randall Prosp, the bellboy that helped him to his room. Witnesses say that he was aged between 20 to 35, had brown hair, a scar on his scalp, visible above his ear, and a cauliflower ear. He was dressed nicely in a black coat. Mary Soaptick, the maid, said that Roland allowed her to clean while he was in the room, but he asked her to not lock the door on her way out because a friend was going to be visiting soon. Mary, as well as the other staff that had entered the room, said that he kept the blinds tightly shut and the lights off except for one dim lamp. Quote Mary's statement to the police, Roland was, quote, either worried about something or afraid, and that he always wanted to kind of keep in the dark. Later that day, at 4 p.m., Mary returned to the room with new towels. She saw Roland laying on the bed dressed and in the dark with the door unlocked. She saw a note that read, Dawn, I will be back in 15 minutes. Wait. The next day, January 3rd, Mary went back to clean the room at 10:30 a.m. She noticed that the door had been locked from the outside. She assumed that Roland had locked it as he left. However, he did not, as he was sitting in the room with the lights off. That meant someone had locked the door from the outside. When Mary was still in the room, Roland answered a phone call and said, No, Dawn, I don't want to eat. I just had breakfast. And repeated, No, I'm not hungry. Mary went back around 4 p.m. to deliver fresh towels when she heard two male voices from inside the room. When she knocked, a rough voice asked, Who is it? She explained that she had brought fresh towels, to which the male said, They don't need any, even though there was no towels in the room. That night, a woman staying in room 1048 reported hearing loud voices, both male and female, cursing on the same floor, so apparently there was a party that night in room 1055. Things started to get stranger from here. The next morning, January 4th, around 7 a.m., the hotel phone operator noticed Roland's room phone had been off the hook without being in use for a while. They sent Randolph, the bellboy, up to the room. He knocked on the door, even though the door was locked and had a don't disturb sign. He heard a little voice say, Come in, turn on the lights. However, the door remained locked, and no one was getting up to let him in. So after knocking repeatedly, Randolph said, Put the phone back on the hook, and left, assuming that Roland was drunk. Around 8:30 a.m., about an hour and a half later, the phone was still off the hook. Harold Pike, another bellboy, let himself into the room using the pass key. Using only the lights from the hallway, Harold saw that Roland was in bed naked, seemingly drunk. He also noticed that the bedding around Roland was darker. The phone stand was kicked over, so he fixed it and put the phone back on. At approximately 10:30 to 10:45 a.m., the phone was off the receiver again. They sent the original bellboy, Randolph, to resolve the situation. When he opened the door, he came upon a truly horrific scene. Here's what he said to the police. When I entered the room, this man was within 2 feet of the door, on his knees and elbows, holding his head in his hands. I noticed blood on his head. I turned the lights on. I looked around and saw blood on the walls, on the bed, and in the bathroom. This frightened me, and I immediately left the room and went downstairs. Roland was found with extensive injuries. He had been tied up with a cord around his neck, wrists, and ankles. It looked like he was tortured. Blood had gotten on the wall and ceiling above the bed. He had been hit on the head repeatedly, and his skull was fractured. He had been stabbed several times in the chest, and his lung was punctured. There was bruising around his neck, meaning he could have been strangled. Remarkably, Roland was still alive. One of the detectives that had arrived on the scene asked Roland about anyone else in the room, to which Roland replied, Nobody. Even though he could hardly speak and was not fully conscious, he explained that he had fell against the bathtub. After the small interaction, he was completely unconscious and taken to the hospital. According to the doctor, the injuries on Roland's body had occurred 6 to 7 hours prior to him being discovered. The detective found no weapon or any of Roland's belongings in the room, which removes suicide from the list of what could have happened. There were 4 fingerprints found on the phone stand, potentially from a female. Roland would die after midnight on January 8th in the hospital. When Roland checked in, he said he was from Los Angeles, but Los Angeles authorities were unable to find any record of Roland T. Owen, bringing into question whether that was the victim's real name. His body was placed for viewing at Melody McGilly Funeral Home. As the story spread, more and more people began reaching out to Kansas City authorities to see if their missing loved one could be Roland, but to no avail. Next, police focused on the mysterious Don that Roland referred to several times while at the hotel. Don was also conceivably the man with the deep voice that Mary heard through the hotel door. Nevertheless, the police search returned no results. Roland's upcoming burial was announced by the Journal-Post on March 3rd to be in a pauper's field. However, the Melody McGilly Funeral Home received an anonymous call from an individual who said they would send the money necessary for providing Roland with a proper funeral. Sure enough, on March 23rd, there was money bundled in a newspaper delivered to the funeral home from an anonymous sender. Funeral flowers were anonymously arranged with the Rock Flower Company along with a card that said, "Love Forever, Louise," placed on Roland's grave. Skipping ahead about a year and a half later, in 1936, a friend of Ruby Ogletree found an American weekly piece talking about the Roland case. Upon looking at the magazine, Ruby would correctly identify Roland as her son who left Birmingham in 1934. Roland's actual name was Artemis Ogletree, and he was only 17 years old. Ruby Ogletree, his mother, had received 3 letters from her son in the spring of 1935. However, they had been delivered after his death. The letters were typed, which is suspicious because Artemis didn't know how to type. The letters were also slangy and unfamiliar to Ruby. After some time, it was revealed that Artemis Ogletree had also stayed at the St. Regis in Kansas City with another man, possibly Don. In the early 2000s, there was something brought up about the case, but didn't lead anywhere. After that, the case would have no further revelations and become a cold case. Here are a few theories of what happened. I won't be able to go into detail on them, but I'll leave the details in the description. Theory number 1. The man referred to as Don beat Artemis Ogletree to death in room 1046 and acted alone. The second theory is similar to the first, but Don didn't act alone. This theory relates to an observation by Charles Blocher, the elevator operator, the night of the murder. The third theory comes from many articles published in the following years that suggest Ogletree was killed for being unfaithful to his fiancée. At only age 17, Artemis Ogletree was killed in room 1046 at the Hotel President in Kansas City for seemingly no reason. No one knows what happened to him that day, and it is very unlikely that we will ever truly know what happened that day in room 1046 and who killed him.